What's up, everyone? This is the Second City Hockey Ice Cold Podcast, Season 2, Episode 4. Robert Zaglinski here, joined as always by my fine co-host, Adam. Adam, how are you doing?
I'm pretty good tonight. Tired. Went on a long road trip this weekend, so I did a lot of driving today to get home, but pretty well. Feeling okay despite being tired.
Feeling
The
okay?
Blackhawks' recent success makes me feel better.
Really? Is it that much of a remedy? Let's talk about that. 5-game winning streak, Adam. I'm not sure all of their play is perfect, since we're doing this right away. But they're doing the fact that it's on the backs of Corey Crawford. The fact that they're more or less controlling play Corsi wise. It's not the same dominant possession teams that of the Blackhawks of old. There's a lot of encouraging signs here.
Yeah, I think that they're taking advantage of more opportunities, and they've been able to just kind of some of the shifting of the lines and stuff like that has kind of reinvigorated the team. The bottom six has been good. Like a lot of the depth players are kind of stepping up. Tyler Mott, who's been pretty good all season so far, definitely the best rookie on the team, has just continued to play well. And so all these things kind of coming together for them at the same time, especially in kind of a busy and important week. They played 4 games this week, so 3 off days. It's the first time they've had 4 games in a single week, including the game tonight that we're kind of recording over as it's going on the television right now. We're not watching it because we're bad Hawks fans.
We are very bad Hawks fans.
Right. But, yeah, like that just in a busy week, especially when you're playing 3 division opponents and Calgary, who is a conference opponent, like being able to, so far get the 6 possible points that have been, offered up and, taking all of them. And then, tonight playing Dallas again, potentially even getting, going 8 for 8 in the point department this week. Like, as much as you can't clinch the division in October, or I guess it's November now, in early November, so it's just too early to even be kind of thinking about that. The points now matter just as much as the points later. And so, these points, an 8-point week in the middle of, or the beginning of November can actually prove to be the difference in the end of April. And so I think it's important that they're doing this well now.
Yeah, and the thing about piling up points in the early season is so you're not exhausting yourself to push for the playoffs in the second half when you need to win more games, when you need to put in more effort. Like last year's Ducks, I feel like that kind of got to them. The Wild of 2 years ago when the Hawks swept them. You have to give yourself a cushion now, and it's working out well for them.
Yeah, it's kind of like a catch-22 in some ways, and where obviously playing well now, you build up a point lead, you kind of create some security for yourself later in the season. Some people will kind of say oh, they're getting hot at the wrong time. Well, I don't really consider a 5-game winning streak they're not like they're blowing their wad here. Like this, the 5-game winning streak in late October, early November is not going to screw them come playoff time. So, sometimes some teams kind of thrive in that needing to, push hard for the playoffs and get a bunch of points. I mean, the 2015 Blackhawks, if you remember, they were almost they were in danger of missing the playoffs with 2 weeks to go, and they kind of had to kick their shit into gear in that last couple of weeks, and that kind of got them hot to go into the playoffs. But at the same time, it is nice to not have to do that, to be able to say we have built a point lead up now, or we had points stashed up before, even if they're in first place in the beginning of March and finish the division in second place because Dallas or Nashville or anyone gets hot, or if same thing for second, if they're in second place and fall to third, that kind of stuff. This is why you win games now. This is why they play games in the beginning of October and the season ends in April, because they all count the same. They're all points that you can get on the board. So getting these points now, again, while it's too early to really think about what it means for the playoff picture, it's still it's important to build these up. And so it's good that they're being able to do it in a quick chunk against relatively good teams.
Yeah, the Canes and Stars have for example, fallen off. The Stars are a little injured, and the Canes aren't the same juggernaut. But it's still the competition. It's still, you play what's in front of you, and you, as you mentioned, this team, kind of like as we've become used to, they get into a little bit of a lull, whether it's coasting, whatever else, in February and March. In the past few, they do that sometimes in the past few seasons. But they've always had good Novembers. They've always had decent enough the first half of the season to where that didn't matter. We'll see how that develops. You wanted to talk about it, and I think we should obviously note it. I mean, Corey Crawford right now is an absolute wall, and I think it's probably fair to say that he's the NHL's best goaltender right now. He's maybe not the best goalie in the league, like if we go across 82 games, playoffs, whatever, but he is definitely the best goalie in the league right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And he, I mean, at this point in time, his save percentage at 5v5. Last I saw, I think Satchel tweeted out that he over like the Hawks 4-game win streak, like through when they were playing Colorado, he had stopped all but one. I think it was like 137 of 138 shots in 5v5 play. Like
now it's actually 218 of 222.
There you go. So that because I didn't watch last night's game. I had no reception when I was on this road trip. But they obviously played well again last night. The Hawks get a win, and he right now, like, it might be a little bit of a stretch, but he is the best player on the Blackhawks, and he has been such the best player on the Blackhawks that he could be like potentially in that Hart Trophy, like the early Hart Trophy talk, where he's the backbone of this team. He's the leader, and he's basically not that, like, again, like you mentioned before, the Hawks aren't getting these wins through like dominating possession or just completely outscoring teams. They are taking advantage of things, but Crawford's keeping them in games, keeping the puck out of the net, and this is the best he's looked in his career to this point, I think, outside of some like obviously he was insane in their playoff runs. But in terms of regular season, I think that this kind of stretch is the best I can remember him looking. And like right now, he's the most valuable player on this team. And I think that without him, he is they're a much worse team. And I think he right now is kind of in that. Not that the Hawks are necessarily on this kind of level, but he is kind of the Carey Price, what Carey Price is to the Canadians right now. I don't think the Hawks would be as bad as the Canadians are without Price if they didn't have Crawford. But I think he's still the backbone.
Yeah, I wanted to note that I think the Hawks are what's different than last year, because the Hawks are similarly constructed as to last year, to where they have a really good power play, top heavy on forwards. Is that they have some young forwards that they can count on, like you mentioned, Tyler Mott, and the defense is helping out more. While Crawford still has to more or less carry the team, there's more support, and this is it's a better team. It's a much better – I think you'll agree. It's a much better team than the 2015-2016 Blackhawks. They're more equipped to withstand just letting Crawford take 35 shots a game, and take advantage of opportunities, because their defense is better and because of these young guys stepping up. I mean, it's heartening. It's really heartening. It's really heartening to see that Crawford's continuing his hot stretch from last year, and that the team is sort of growing into that too, even if they're not the same juggernaut they used to be.
Right, and I think the a way I would say it is they're just more well-rounded this year than last year.
Yeah,
they have the depth is there. They look like a more complete team than they did last year, where even with the lack of forward depth that is still kind of glaring, but right now they're making up for that because of the way that it's been staggered, and they can continue to make up for that by staggering lines. Maybe not necessarily the way that we talked about on the last podcast where we drop Artem Anisimov to the third line, but they have options like that to be able to kind of stagger some things and create more offense everywhere. And again, like Tyler Mott, Ryan Hartman, Nick Schmaltz, like these guys are talented young players, and they're going to they've played pretty well thus far. Mott's found the score sheet more than any other rookie, but the rookies have still looked pretty good, and they're going to this experience is valuable, and being on this team throughout the whole season is going to help them a lot.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. I kind of lost my train of thought there anyway, so go ahead.
Is there a concern now that the Hawks are sort of that the Hawks will Braden Holtby Crawford? I mean, they have a more capable backup than Washington does, but where they're overworking him and eventually the dam breaks. I mean, it didn't really last year, but again, as we said, this is a more well-rounded team, so the concern is probably less so, but it's still fair to ponder.
I think I think there's some kind of concern about that, but I don't. I don't think that I don't remember exactly how many games Holtby played last year, but I think a couple of years ago he played like 72. I don't think Crawford's gonna get more than 60. I think he'll be in the 50s, especially because Scott Darling is the kind of goalie that if he sits too long, when you finally play him, he looks like shit. And Darling is a capable. He needs to have a little bit of regularity to his schedule. He kind of needs to be playing, probably I would say once every 7 or 8 games, or probably once every 6 or 7 games is more accurate. Just make sure that he's kind of in his rhythm on top of his game, and also just to kind of give Crawford that break. Like you said, you don't want to wear him out. You don't. Again, it's kind of cliche to kind of dig into this, but you don't want to use his best hockey too early. Which again, if that ends up being the case, it's not like because he's overworked, but you want to be able to sustain this success. And if you're playing him every single night, that's going to be ugly. But it's good. Like, I think one thing that's important is like tonight with Crawford having played last night, Scott Darling starting tonight. So they're not going Crawford back to back because he's hot. They're staying logical, staying realistic about it, and saying, hey, we probably should not be playing this guy 2 nights in a row. He needs a little bit of rest. He kind of needs, we need to kind of keep a regular schedule how we would normally. Even if if Crawford was playing like shit, obviously Darling would probably be playing more. But if Crawford was just kind of playing as you expected, you have to kind of, even when he's playing at an elite level, you just kind of keep that same kind of schedule. Because you don't want to overwork him, and you don't want to put yourself in a position where when you're putting Scott Darling in the net, you're uncomfortable with how he might be able to play.
Yeah, and I think the most eye-opening statistic of all is that he still has a .936 save percentage, overall. That's power play and penalty and on the PK. Considering that the Hawks' penalty kill was absolute utter garbage for 3 weeks. Now I think it's on a 12 for 12 streak, or 12 for 12, or 13 for 13 streak, or maybe 12 for 13. That's off the top of my head, so it's much better. And as another note before we move on to the next housekeeping, I think the Hawks are clearly a better team if they don't. Well, not that they're clearly a better team, but if they don't have. But if they don't have Crawford in, they're still capable. If the Canadians don't have Price in, they lose 10-0 to the Columbus Blue Jackets. So,
yeah, I don't know if the Hawks are on that kind of level. That is pretty ugly when they do that. But I think one of the most important things for the Hawks is just that they. Did you lose me there?
Yeah, I lost you there. Sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll try to edit this out when we do it. But anyway, I'm going to do a quick clap so that when I see the levels, I know it, okay? So, as I was saying, I think that the most important thing for the Hawks is that they keep Crawford with a regular schedule, kind of keep Darling in the rotation, just to kind of give Crawford those nights up. Especially, I think the kind of games that Darling needs to start sometimes are when, say, Crawford plays they have 4 games in a week and it's every other day, giving Darling one of those 3 games where Crawford can have a day off from playing a game, that basically 3 days off in a row from having to play game hockey, just kind of taking warm-ups and practice will be important for him to just kind of stay in a rhythm, be able to be at his absolute best when he's on the ice, and have a good, capable backup who is again, Darling is a capable enough backup. He's not the kind of backup that is deserving of an NHL starting job, but he's an NHL backup that is a good NHL backup, is serviceable enough, and at his price tag, you're not going to find anything better. And so it's good that he's on this team, and he just needs to find his way into the rotation a little bit for his own sake, and also just that the Hawks don't wear out Crawford too much.
Let's now talk about the line match, and you mentioned our little pondering of moving Anisimov to the third line. Well, the Hawks have done something different. It's where they've put Taves with Kane again, and Panik is up with them, and they now have Panarin and Hossa as wings with Artem Anisimov, and it's worked out, I guess, pretty well considering the two have 58% Corsi when on the ice together, and Hossa has 4 goals in his last 5 games, and Panarin is just an absolute torch on the ice. every time he's on against any competition. I think I'm looking at Panarin's stats too. He has counting it up. He has 8 points in his last 5 games with 3 goals. So it's kind of worked out well. And Taves and Kane are looking better to Daydream Nation, whatever anyone likes to call them, look much better and more comfortable together too after being separated for so many years. Think about this.
I think the one thing I like is just that, like, when Quenneville kind of reaches, people call it the panic button to put Kane and Taves together. I don't think I agree with that. It's only viewed as the panic button because he doesn't do it a lot. But, like, how many teams are there in the NHL that don't play their 2 best players together? Like, I honestly cannot think of that many. The only one that really comes to mind is the Penguins. That's my first immediate thought, because obviously Malkin and Crosby are both centers, so you can't really play them together. Otherwise, you're playing one of them out of position. But like the Stars, they played Ben and Sagan together, and then like the Canucks for all those years played the Sedins together, and even in Pittsburgh, Phil Kessel, who's an elite player, they wanted to play him with Crosby, and that didn't work out. So now he doesn't play with him, but they wanted to try that. And so all these teams are trying to put these combinations of their elite players together. The Blackhawks have stayed away from that for balance. So going to that kind of setting that up isn't a panic move. It's like a logical move. It's, hey, splitting it up isn't working. Time to put them together and like let that be the one line that produces. Especially like you said, it's gotten Hossa like a lot more success. Hossa has 4 goals in his last 5 games, and I'm not saying it's because he's away from Jonathan Toews, but sometimes you literally just need a different look. You need like kind of a fresh perspective and different people, and just a little shakeup. Like when what you're doing isn't working, doing something else and like can work. And so when you get shaken up, when you get put on a different line, and now you have different line mates who play different style and can have different strengths, that kind of thing can benefit you, because it's like, okay, how can I adapt to these strengths in order to have success, and how can they adapt to me to have success? And that's what is happening with the Hawks, and that's a very good thing to see, especially because this is not the first time. This is not the last time that the Hawks are going to have to change up their line, combinations this year. They're probably going to have to at some point go back to having Kane and Tay split up. They're probably going to have to, do this a couple of times and try to find different combinations. So the fact that it's been working out well for them in this recent run is very encouraging to me, that the shakeup has reinvigorated people.
And I think it's also not that we're underplaying it, but it's also people last year obviously criticized Panarin so much that he's doing it all because he's with Kane. He's kind of tearing it up with whoever he's on the ice with. In fact, Kane is actually worse without Panarin than vice versa. Panarin, you could put him on with any line, and he's at 58% Corsi, and he's just looked tremendous on both ends of the ice. I mean, this is a guy that's probably outpricing himself out of Chicago at this point with how he's playing. And that's probably what's contributing to Hossa's success as well. I mean, we can discuss that.
I think.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Right, and people use that to discount him, and like you said, it's basically just a load of bullshit. It's not, obviously playing with Patrick Kane is going to make anyone better. Playing with Patrick Kane would make Jordan Tutu better. Playing with Patrick Kane would make Brandon Prust better, because
arguably.
Well, no, because Patrick Kane's a top 3 player in the NHL, arguably the number 1 player in the NHL, unless just depending on how you view other players. But he's without a doubt in that top 5 conversation. Just kind of depends on how people would arrange it, I think. And he's so good that he elevates the games of other people. So obviously Panarin's going to be made better, but also Artemi Panarin is an elite talent, and he elevates game, like you said, he elevates Kane's play. He elevates the play of those around him, again, because he's an elite talent, and playing with elite talent raises the game of others. And again, one of the things I actually said, I used this when we did the top 25 under 25. I had the one about Alex DeBrincat, And one of the kind of slight knocks on Alex DeBrincat is that in junior, one of the reasons he had so many goals was because he played with a generational talent. He played on a line with Connor McDavid, and then he played on a line with Dylan Strome, who were the numbers 1 and 4 overall picks in 2013 or 2015. Well, if that's a reasonable enough, like, oh, he's playing with elite talent. But if you're not capable of stepping up, you're not going to step up, no matter who you're playing with. If Brandon Prust is not a 30-goal player, so playing him with Patrick Kane is not going to make him a 30-goal player. That's not like he doesn't have that kind of talent level, and that's really not to even knock on Brandon Prust and use him as oh, he's a shitty hockey player. It's just that's not the kind of player he is. So
no, I get you. I get what you're saying. Yeah.
So Artemi Panarin has to have the talent to be a 30-goal, 70-point player. Otherwise, playing with Patrick Kane is not going to elevate him. And so the fact that it worked only shows the talent level of Panarin. And being elevated by Kane is just a plus. Maybe instead of being the 77-point player, top 10 in the NHL last year, Panarin would have been 65 points, top 15 or top 20. Even that is still elite production in today's NHL. And so he is an elite talent. And so having him play with Marian Hossa elevates his game as well. And that's one of the reasons I think that Artem Anisimov has been so effective as a second-line center is because he's around Panarin so much. Because even when Kane gets split from that line, Anisimov and Panarin are basically a duo that sticks together.
NHL's point leader, Artem Anisimov, to you. Thank you very much.
Very true.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. People were saying for the past year or so that the Hawks can't split up Kane and Panarin for balance, and it's just kind of striking to me how their old backup plan used to be putting Toews and Kane together. Well, that's obviously dead. That's just as you mentioned, putting your best center, best forward together. And now the shift is to switch 2 wings on the second line. That's changed. I think that's interesting to note.
Right, and just
let's talk.
Sorry, wait. Just to kind of, if I may offer a hot take here, to me, I think what makes much more sense for the Blackhawks, as I mentioned before, is playing Kane and Toews together because they're supposedly your 2 best players. But I think you're hard pressed, or I should say, you would not be hard pressed to make a very logical case for Artemi Panarin actually being the Blackhawks' second best forward and actually being a better player than Jonathan Toews in terms of production and a better fit to play with Patrick Kane regularly. And so I think that what makes more sense is for the Hawks to kind of let Toews and Kane be a duo together, and then when they if you need offense, then your panic move is putting Panarin and Kane together because they're your 2 best offensive producers. So not having them together makes more sense than having them together, in my opinion, because when you have them together, you're a one-line scoring team. If you split them up and put Kane with Toews, you activate Jonathan Toews in a more offensive way, and you give that top line a huge scoring threat, that second line a huge scoring threat, and then you have depth with developing scoring threats in Tyler Mott and Nick Schmaltz and even
Ryan Hartman.
Right, even Ryan Hartman is a little bit of a scoring threat, and then guys like Tanner Kiro and other guys, Vinny Hinostroza, those kind of guys are still developing and have some skill to their game, and so they can develop into useful NHL players. And so when you're developing that and you can balance that top 10 or that top 6, that is super important. I think that's why I would view it much more as a panic move if Quenneville went back to having Panarin and Kane together than having Quenneville put Toews and Kane together.
None of that is a hot take, my friend. I 100% agree with you. I don't think anybody would disagree.
I think the hot take part was when I said Panarin's better than Toews.
He's a better offensive player than Toews at this point. I mean, we can be honest about that. Overall, maybe not, but that was also justified. Let's talk about that PK because I'm seeing on Twitter right now.
They gave up a goal.
They gave up a goal, but before that, it was 15 for 15 in the past few weeks. So I'm not sure if you've watched as much lately. I mean, as we noted. But what do you think has changed in that they're better and actually not being absolute dog shit when killing penalties?
Well, I think one of the big things, without a doubt, has to be like the mental side of it, which as much as it is kind of cliche and narrative, narrative pushing kind of to say it's a mental thing, it's a mindset. Jonathan Tays talked about it. He said it's a mental thing. It's in our heads, and when it's in your head, when you're afraid of failing, or when you're afraid of saying that one thing, you're going to say that one thing because you're thinking about it. When you're afraid of giving up the penalty kill or don't want to make that mistake, you're going to make that mistake because you're so apprehensive. So I think the Hawks have just kind of said, you know what, like screw this. Let's just like go clean slate and say, you know what, we're not going to be afraid to make these mistakes. Like we're going to play to a lot. Like if we make a mistake because we're overtly aggressive or because we're doing what we think we should do as opposed to not wanting to do it and make a mistake, that is an important first step towards having a good penalty kill. And I just see a little bit more aggressiveness from them. And I think also one of the big keys to the Hawks struggle early on, which I think was maybe underplayed a little bit, but Corey Crawford had an abysmal shooting or save percentage when the Hawks were shorthanded before. And again, we've talked about how Crawford's been so good, but he was not great for them on the penalty kill. He was and he was getting beat by shots, like by good shots. It's not like he was giving up weak goals, but I don't maybe he wasn't seeing the puck as clearly. Maybe it was just more difficult for him to react, but he's also stepped up his shorthanded play. So that's been key as well. But I just think that overall the Hawks just look a little bit more aggressive, which is what I talked about before with kind of getting on the points a little bit more. Their mentality has changed. They're a little less afraid to make mistakes, and so it's not in their head as much. They feel more confident. And then Crawford has just kind of elevated his play. I think maybe in some ways Crawford said, okay, you know what, like I need to kind of get my shit together, which I'm not a goalie, so I don't know exactly what getting your shit together when shorthanded would entail, like how you approach it differently. But maybe that's an adjustment he made, and now he's stepped up and is playing better when shorthanded, and that's helped them as well.
Yeah, on that Crawford note of stepping up on the PK last night in Dallas, they had Dallas had a 6-on-4 in the end, and he just absolutely, because of a penalty and an empty net, and he just absolutely shut it down. I mean, your goalie, as cliche as that is your best penalty killer.
Right, he has to be your goal. The thing about cliches is that they're
true because they're used so much because they're true.
Right, that's exactly like it's. When you say, oh, your best players have to be your best players. Yeah, that's a cliche and it sounds stupid, but that's what it is. And your goalie does have to be your best penalty killer because you could put fucking, I don't even give a shit, Patrice Bergeron and Jonathan Tays out there together to kill a penalty. But if, who's a bad goalie? I don't even know who a bad goalie is.
Al Montoya.
Yeah, there you go. If Al Montoya is in net and he is, sucks ass, you're going to give up a goal. I don't care who's out there
10.
for you. Right, yeah, exactly. So that kind of shit, like you need to have a goalie that can step up. And so Crawford posting a sub-700 save percentage when shorthanded is obviously a recipe for disaster for the Blackhawks. Not that he was necessarily the problem, because there were other problems, obviously, but he needs to be able to play well when shorthanded as well. Typically, shorthanded, your save percentage is going to be horrible anyway, but being in the 800 to 850 range, or 800 900 range preferably, that kind of stuff is going to be, being able to have that kind of play is going to be good for you from your goalie. And so if your goalie's playing like shit, your penalty kill is going to look a lot worse. So Crawford's play, I think, has been a huge step in the right direction, and also makes the Hawks feel more confident because they know that they can kind of trust him. Like, not to say that they couldn't trust him before, because obviously he's been their best player this year, but to be able to say, okay, we have this goalie. He is been playing very well shorthanded. So if we make a mistake, he can cover it up for us. That kind of thing is beneficial to be able to trust a goalie that much. And again, I don't necessarily think that was the problem before, that they didn't trust him, but the play of Crawford definitely helps everybody.
And I wanted to touch on that. I wanted to keep pushing this cliche conversation too. This is with the same thing with their mentality, how they were letting their lack of success get into their heads. I think a lot of the times, especially like guys like you and me and people in really as writers, as analysts, whatever, in trying to explain what we're watching and finding advanced numbers, we're always trying to find this perfectly reasonable explanation through numbers of what's going on. but a lot of the times people will take out emotions out of that, or they'll take out how of the factors of the team's morale as noting like and getting into their head, and they'll discount it and they'll make fun of it. Oh, grit. Oh, that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. But that all of that factors in. That factors in all the time. The team's overall sensibilities always factors in, and momentum, as much as we say doesn't exist, it's the same. The momentum is really, if we're being honest, it's that emotion. It's that like failure of lack of success. It doesn't exist in the ways people try to say it does, in that you score a goal and now you're bound for 4 more. It just exists more in the overall team just being confident, and they didn't have that. They didn't have that for most of October.
No, absolutely, because these guys, like, okay, these guys are professional athletes, but they're not robots. Like, they're human beings, every single one of them. Believe it or not, they bleed the same blood we do. They have this, they eat the same kinds of food. Well, maybe a little healthier if you're Jonathan Tays, but they still, like, they're still people. They bleed, they sweat, they cry, they laugh. They have families. They're human beings. So they can't just turn off that human part of them when they're playing hockey. They can't, they can't just like give up a goal and all of a sudden they don't care. You know what I mean? Like there's emotion, and like you see that all the time. You see frustration. Jonathan Tays is called Captain Serious because he takes the game so seriously. That is an emotion. Patrick Kane is, kind of known as like, the party boy thing maybe comes from a little bit more off the ice issues and things that have happened, but he's also like, he has fun on the ice and is viewed as like a vibrant electric person. That's emotion. Same thing with guys like PK Subban and Steven Stamkos and all these players that like Alex Ovechkin, when they show like this emotion, like how much they love the game, that, that's how many times you really don't see any more that guys score a goal and just go, okay, I scored a goal. You know what I mean? Like they're celebrating because they're happy, they're invested. And so when you are invested and you're not playing well, that's going to get you. That's going to get in your head. I mean, think about when you play games as a kid. If you, played baseball and you haven't had a hit in, the last two or three games, you squeeze that bat a little tighter. You're a little more nervous up there, and that doesn't necessarily help you. You have to try to be able to put that out. But that's part of being a professional athlete, and that's you kind of have to reach a breaking point there where you go, okay, you know what, we're done being frustrated with it. But you're going to be frustrated with it for a certain amount of time because you are a human being. That's like, it's natural to let emotions kind of play into it. It's not a personal fault. Like it's like that's science. That's like science and anatomy, and that kind of stuff happens no matter what. And it's just, so people to kind of discount those things is, again, it's not the most important thing, but they are important aspects of it.
Yeah, it's to be clear, it's not discounting the kinds of progressions we've made in analytics, in numbers, in explaining better how the things we see in sports. But it's more of a plea just to not forget that, to remember that while it isn't as important as old school people will say it is. It still factors in incredibly, as much as we say it won't. I mean, there's no doubt about that.
Right. I think one of the reasons people avoid using those kind of arguments is because it's the easiest argument.
Yeah,
but sometimes the easiest argument is just the easiest one because it's the right argument. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to come up with some weird example, but yeah, sometimes the easiest argument is just the correct analysis, and that's why it's so easy, because it's so obvious. Like if a player looks dejected while killing a penalty and you can see it, then it's not wrong to go, hey, maybe they don't feel it, maybe they're not confident, maybe they lack the confidence in themselves, and that does not make it lazy analysis. I don't know.
Absolutely. Just as a final note before we do a little other wrap up, Hawks currently losing 1-0 to Dallas. We'll see how that wraps up. We won't have it by the end of this podcast. Another not necessarily crucial stretch coming up. There's a game against the Blues, Caps. Hopefully they keep the winning streak going or keep piling up points. Or at least the young guys working and growing together.
Should be some good games next week, though, like playing the Blues, who last time the Hawks played them, it was opening night.
We were there when they got rolled.
We were there, and the Blues kind of took over the game. The Hawks the Blues controlled it pretty much from start to finish. The Hawks had 2 leads, but then the Blues just kind of said, all right, enough of this. It's time for us to take over. So the Hawks are going to be look like looking for a little bit of payback, looking to kind of redeem themselves. They get a big division win over a division rival, and then you have, playing the Capitals, who are one of the top 2 teams in the East. Like, they're going to be good games next week, and I'm excited to watch them.
Yeah, absolutely, Adam. Okay, just as a note, we wanted to discuss this. Doctor Strange, I haven't seen it. You haven't seen it, but I imagine you will. We are both fanboys. We are both nerds. How excited are you to see it?
So I'm not super familiar with Doctor Strange character, but the idea and like the previews I've seen and the reviews I've heard of the movie make me excited to go see it, because as much as I'm a DC person, like, the Marvel universe is so much fun. The Marvel universe is so good, and they just continually nail these kind of movies, and so I'm excited to see it. And it's just like the Doctor Strange character within the Marvel universe, which doesn't necessarily have like that kind of like realism feel, but everything just kind of feels like as though I'm trying to think of the word. Like, it kind of feels like it makes sense. Like, it's all possible. You know what I mean? It's not.
It's trippy, but they somehow they're able to define it well.
Right.
Yeah, I got it.
It's not too supernatural to be like, oh, like, this is so over the top. You know what I mean? Which sometimes you can kind of get into that way with superheroes. It just feels more grounded, a little more like it's possible, stuff like that. And so I think the Doctor Strange is kind of a step away from that, and that it's like, oh, you just like. From what the vibe I get from the commercials is like, oh, if you just like tap into this special brain system, you can do magic and shit like that. That's, I don't know. Again, I don't know about the character, so I don't want to sound really stupid by saying that. That's just the vibe I'm getting. But it seems like, not, I don't want to say risk, but just something different, which I think is exciting, because it's a step in a different direction, and introducing a new character. It's like a solo film. I'm sure there will be cameos and other characters in the movie. I don't know who's scheduled.
Every Marvel movie is a setup for the next movie, or
like,
right,
exactly.
Next round of movies. So,
and that's how it works. But I think it looks good. I'm excited to see it. I'm excited to see how this step, where this kind of like moves the Marvel universe set after Civil War, because obviously, like, I don't know how much what happened in Civil War will play into this, but just with the state of the Marvel universe after Civil War, it's kind of in question, like, what exactly is going on. And so then, what exactly is going to be happening with the Avengers. So this is kind of a step to get some sort of answer, even if it's just little, even if it's just the end credit scene. It's still like the next step in Phase 3, which is going to be fun, I think.
On that trippy note or supernatural note, I think a lot of it derives from their Marvel's success with Guardians of the Galaxy, to where they saw how that took off. And I know you're not necessarily the biggest fan of it, but overall, like, on a general scale, it did take off for them. And and that's not exactly like in their typical vein of other traditional superheroes. And that, I guess, that kind of gives them the courage to do this here. Like, for example, like in Iron Man 3, the Mandarin. The Mandarin is this crazy supernatural freak, but they had it like create with amazing like ancient powers, like in the comics. But they hadn't done Guardians of the Galaxy yet. They hadn't done another film like that, so they didn't necessarily feel comfortable, at least in my mind, to put one of Iron Man's flagship villains in the last Iron Man movie, or I mean, I think it's the second to last movie, or for a well-established popular character, and throw people off. So, I mean, this is another nice step in the direction. This is probably a movie where a lot of people will enjoy themselves late at night, if you catch my drift. But yeah, I'm looking forward to see it. I'm looking forward to see it because it's different. Like, as you said, it's different. It's not as cliche, even if we were just praising cliches a few minutes ago.
Right, and I think I heard one of my friends who's already seen it said that like the effects of the movie lend themselves to 3D really well, and like he didn't see it in 3D, but he was like, I need to go see it in 3D because he feels like it's one of those movies that seeing it in 3D is actually worth it. So I'm kind of thinking about maybe doing that. But overall, I think it looks really, really good. I think, again, the Marvel universe has been so successful, and I just think it's fun to see every step they take, especially when it's something new and something different. because as much as good, as great as Civil War was, and knowing like the characters, if every single if every single movie is just more stories with the same characters, it just kind of gets old. So introducing new characters and allowing a new kind of story and tying that in and seeing how they'll be able to tie it into the Avengers, because obviously he's going, like, Doctor Strange will become part of the Avengers, or help them in some way. That is going to be cool to kind of see the way they step into that new direction.
Yeah, and if anything, bring a kaleidoscope to the movie theater. That might even work out for you well too.
Absolutely.
Adam, that should just about wrap it up. Do you have any final thoughts here?
No, I do not. Go Blackhawks. I hope they win tonight. By the time people hear this, they will know if they did or not, but I don't know yet. So go Blackhawks and hope they win. And also, I'm a White Sox fan, not a Cubs fan, but I gotta say it was super cool seeing the Cubs winning the World Series. I was super happy for people. Like, I know some people say like it's ass kissy to say I'm happy for Cubs fans, but seriously, I know a lot of good Cub fans who deserved to be happy, and that Cubs team was special. It was fun watching them, and it was cool to see how many people were at the parade. That was crazy.
Yeah, that's a cool sports story. Like, all these people that have been waiting for it so long for their entire lives, like why rain on that parade? Like, that literally once in a lifetime, even beyond a lifetime championship. So I mean, they're probably in line for more, but it hasn't happened in so long. Like, they should be reveling in it. All the congratulations to them. I'll double up on that.
Yeah, and I think one of the things, like being a Sox fan, one of the reasons I was able to enjoy watching the Cubs win the World Series and not be one of those Sox fans that's like, oh, I don't want the Cubs to win, which I think is really, really stupid, is that I think I said it before, maybe in this space, that Jason Goff said it on 670 The Score, which I really agree with him. The high tide raises all ships, and so the Cubs being good is going to be beneficial to all these teams in Chicago. And so it will be good that the Cubs won. And again, it's good for Chicago, the city. It's good for Chicago as a sports town, and it's cool. And yeah, I'm happy for Cub fans, and hopefully they can do it again. And this is kind of the maybe.
Oh, I was just rooting for them in the first one. After this,
I don't know. I mean, I really don't. I say
I don't care that much. I
say hopefully they can do it again, in terms of like it'd be really cool to see them kind of start like that be the spawn of a several year run of multiple championships, a la the 2010 Blackhawks, because it'd be kind of cool to have that, like, relive that kind of same story in Chicago. But if maybe the White Sox could do that, I would be very happy about it. But I kind of prayers up
raise this high tide. Yes, raise my Bears, please.
Bears.
Okay, yeah. I mean, that was a perfect final thought. This has been the Second City Hockey Ice Cold Podcast for Adam Hess. You can follow him on Twitter @_Adam Hess. Follow me on Twitter @Robert Zaglinski. Follow Second City Hockey @2ND City Hockey. And in general, follow all of our work at Second City Hockey, the website. The podcast speaks for itself. Robert Zaglinski again for Adam Hess, signing off. Stay classy, everyone.